Good afternoon and welcome to Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, May 25th. My name is John French and I am currently the acting mayor, councillor. So item number one is to welcome everyone to the Squamish Nation Traditional Territory. And item number two is adoption of the agenda. The staff recommendation is that council adopt the May 25th, 2021 Committee of the Whole agenda. Somebody move that? Moved by Councillor Anderson and seconded by Councillor Race. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. And formality in Ministerial Order M192, the staff recommendation is that pursuant to Ministerial Order number M192, the District of Squamish is excluding in-person public attendance at this May 25th, 2021 meeting, on the basis that full public attendance in a manner consistent with public health orders and recommendations cannot be accommodated at this time, and the district is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting with the following means. It's being live streamed, and a video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on demand. And can I have somebody move that, please? Moved by Councillor Herford and seconded by Mayor Elliott. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. And just one more formality, I need to share the electronic participation statement. Council members attending this meeting electronically are required to advise the chair of the meeting the following circumstances. A, when the council member disconnects and or reconnects, enters or exits the meeting so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. B, council members are to identify themselves when they advise the chair that they wish to be placed on the speakers list. C, with respect to a vote, council members are only required to state they vote. No statement is required if the member is in favor. D, council members shall put the telephone or computer on mute unless they wish to speak. E, council members shall be involved in and participate in the meeting. F, council members shall text the chief administrative officer or corporate officer if they have technical difficulty with their telephone or their computer, as in they have to be reconnected to the meeting. And G, the meeting shall be recessed for up to 10 minutes if a technical difficulty occurs on the district side, which results in the council member being unable to be connected to the meeting. And with that, we'll move to number 4 on our agenda, staff reports. And first up is the RCMP year-end report. And we're joined by Staff Sergeant Gareth Bradley and Inspector Robert Dykstra. Gareth, am I starting with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go through the report here, and I know I have limited time in your busy schedule, so Mayor, Council members, Ms. Glenda and Ms. Arthurs and city staff, really appreciate taking the time for inviting us here today. Yeah, and we'll run through our year-end presentation for the year 2021. And you know, our view in towards the future as our strategic plan has ended this session, and we look to do some consultation, which we already have, and create a new new strategic report for the next 3 years. So, next slide, if you please. Sorry, I got a big blue bubble in the middle of my. I'll just read off my presentation here. Oh, gotta love it. There we go. There we go. Okay. Strategic plan, guiding principles and priorities are important for us. Operational context and challenges for the year. We'll go through that, and Sea to Sky Regional Police Services review and conclusion, and what we're looking forward to for the upcoming 2021 to 2023 year. Next slide, please. So there's been some changes in our detachment area, as you can see from the top there. Our new inspector is with us today. Robert Dykstra comes from up north and has a varied background and experience, and we're really welcome and glad to have him here as he starts his journey in the Sea to Sky, getting to know all the different detachment areas. Obviously, there I am for the South Zone commander. We break the North Zone and South Zone up into segments, so Pemberton and Whistler are north, and Squamish and Bowen Island are south. So I look after Bowen Island as well. We have a new addition to our operations NCO rank. Dan Pollock came to us in March of last year, and he's been great, real organized member, and brings a wealth of knowledge from Vernon area. We have in our GIS, General Investigation Section, Sergeant Jeff Shore, and our outreach investigational team is headed by Corporal Angie Kermer, and our RCMP admin manager, Amanda Daly, and the Squamish admin manager local is Kim Lebrenz. With those two, my job will be way more difficult, so I appreciate all of those folks that work with me, and they make my life a little bit easier every day. Next slide, please. So our 2019-2021 strategic plan has been a result of collaborative processes. You probably remember, or you might not, we had a bit of a detachment gathering physically in our building, and we talk about different priorities for the community with our stakeholders and community members. Obviously, this session has ended, and we're going into a bit of a different mode where we had an online presentation for that feedback. So it's a bit of a different approach, one that we haven't done before, and we're just in the process of consolidating all those all the information from that to see what our new set of priorities will be for the community. Plan was prepared and guided by local, regional, and provincial national priorities, which will be the same moving forward here. Our fiscal year, it runs from April to April, so it's a little bit different from provincial and municipal business lines. We go from April to March, so it's a little bit off, but anyway, we'll move on. The plan is supported by various mediums of communication strategies. Again, obviously, we can do the gathering that we would normally have in face-person consultations, which is super important, as the COVID-19 protocols wouldn't allow that this year. But we look forward to getting past that in the years to come and having some more face-to-face sit-downs. Next slide, please. Just some guiding principles and priorities surround some of our initiatives is obviously enhancing public safety, accountability, and good governance is important to myself and our organization, or organizational excellence. So having my members strive to be the best they can, engagement in our communities with our SOIT team headed by Corporal Kermer there. It's a very important piece in our relationship with the communities. And innovation and change, it's a huge guiding principle as we have to see what the trends are and focus, technology advantages. That being said, with all of our technological experiences over the last 15 months, we've had to adapt and innovate for sure. Yeah, and then our geographic diversity in the Squamish Sea to Sky communities. Each area has got a little bit different needs and expectations, and we're seeing a rapid influx of tourist population to the area and our rapidly growing communities. There's been since our last reporting period, since our strategic plan started, cannabis legalization has occurred, and we're looking to prioritize emergency disaster response, which is important, just given the local regional area that we have here. We have a lot of hazards and critical infrastructure pieces in place in Squamish specifically, and obviously the mental health and wellness of safety of community and our members. So next slide, please. This one's a little hard to see. It's a graphic of our strategic plan and some of the initiatives that we have under each pillar. Each pillar is owned by a member representative throughout the community, throughout the corridor. And those people drive the initiatives for our reporting periods. Next slide, please. Thank you. Those are, and we, last reporting period, we came up with crime reduction, road safety, community outreach and engagement, and with a focus on Indigenous peoples and cultural content, investing in our people. Those are our 4 pillars with our community consultation. And like I said, each pillar has a person to drive those initiatives forward and making sure we're hitting our targets and meeting the community's needs. Staff Sergeant Jeff Shore is in charge of the crime reduction. Acting Staff Sergeant Banks up in Whistler is in charge of the road safety, community outreach, and Indigenous people. That is my pillar, and the old Inspector Kara Triance and Inspector Robert Dykstra and myself are also looking after investing in our people. Next slide, please. Actually, you can 2 slides. That'd be great. Another slide. Thank you. So we have, sorry. I have a touch screen computer and that was embarrassing. My apologies. My computer screen went blank. I'm good now. So our enforcement strategies under crime reduction, it was different for 2020. Obviously, first 3 months we were on track, and then in March when the pandemic hit, crime didn't stop, but the way we're trying to respond to crime and the evolving pandemic did put a play on how we responded to crime. But we had some interesting files throughout the year. We're looking to support and develop evolving operational plans for crime reduction unit in the area to help with our prolific offenders. And we know from statistics that a lot of the crime is being driven by a small number of people. So we're looking to help those folks get on board with some of our community initiatives, community groups, partnerships, and looking to drive that crime down. Operational planning for major events. We've done that in the past with some of the music festivals. We're looking to do that moving forward with LNG and some of the other large events that we have in the corridor. We were able to get some training days in, which was a bit unique. We had to adjust our delivery methods, safety protocols, given the pandemic. But these critical training pieces are important for our members' development and increasing their ability to go out and train and use the skills that they develop here. So we do have mandatory training, like our firearms every year. So those skills are perishable. So we like to try to get that in, which we did in later in the year. There's also a lot of education around the CCLA for cannabis possession, and then we had some partnerships with the cannabis safety unit from the provincial side. Those folks came up and provided some information to our watch members just regarding their services, what their mandate is, and how we can partner with them. Next slide, please. Youth is also an important pillar of ours. We had some online safety presentations, Safer Schools, collaboration with School District 48. We're trying to roll out It's a No campaign, which was started in Abbotsford. So it's Yeah, it started. Sorry, it started by Abbotsford PD. It was a program where school youth officers would go in and talk to kids about taking compromising photos of themselves and putting them on the internet to random people or people they might not know. So it's important for our youth to know that. And in the pandemic for the 2020 year, our collaboration between our community teams in the north and in the south, they created a video to be able to share with the schools. So in this instance, you instead of when you're asked for a photo, you take a picture of the screenshot of it's a no, and then you send that. So it's reducing the stigma and the peer pressure for kids to be able to talk about it and get that message out. We're also working with schools to do restorative justice, and we never ended up getting into presentations in the schools per se. We're looking at options to do some online collaboration. Next slide, please. Our second pillar by Acting Staff Sergeant Banks. It's documented traffic enforcement and required seasonal policing initiatives, increase the enforcement safety and campaigns for motorcyclists as well. Not so much in Squamish, but a little bit in the north. We had a series of serious incidents that closed the highway, which affects the flow of traffic through Squamish here. Increased look at serious and fatal MVIs, which have, thanks to the road modifications with the no posts, those have dramatically decreased over the last few years. Working with our Sea to Sky Traffic Services, BC Highway Patrol, we're targeting some hotspots and looking at collision data. We saw a need to increase our DRE and FSST trained members. You might ask what that is. So it's a drug recognition expert and sobriety field testing. So doing the various tests, we find it important for members to have the training for those skills and those stops where they need to see if a person's been under the influence of drugs while driving impaired, so they can have the skills to be confident out on the road. We've also made it a priority to team up with school zones. We know there's been some roadways that have been changed, and 30-kilometer school zones have been added up on the boulevard. We've been out and present in those, and some of the members take that to heart and are out there every day. And we also have Constable Scarecrow back, who he's gone through a lot of adventures, being stolen and graffitied, but we have some of those out back helping, lending a helping hand to slow drivers down now. So it's an important tool, and it's a good way to get some messaging out around speed enforcement. Next slide. So we have graduated license programming with ICBC. Obviously, that was a little bit challenging to do throughout the year. Usually we have just distracted driving courses, and we do bike rodeos. All those are starting to be reimagined, and how we can do that with online content. And obviously we've had to do more of a increased presence in school zones. With that, we've recently hired a reservist who's pictured here. Constable Gary Sidhu is back with us. He retired in July. He was our full-time traffic member, and we've hired him back on to do community traffic mandates within the district of Squamish. So I'm just pretty excited. It's actually his first shift today, so I'm thrilled that he's back on that portfolio. Next slide, please. Community engagement and Indigenous peoples. Obviously, this was a challenging year for community teams. Normal years, we're out in community, help building strong partnerships. You know, this year, like everybody, the word Zoom and you're muted or your filter is on were top of mind. We really needed to start to think outside the box about how we can deliver community programs and how we can build those bridges, because we like to get out and be present and engage with people. So it's a little bit different. Obviously, you guys are well aware, well aware of that, doing that through the computer and through media platforms. And so we started off and trying to think how we can reach some of the youth, which we came up with the idea of doing some of the birthday parties. Everybody's birthday was canceled in early March, April, May, June, and we got out there and played some song requests for some of the young kids and tried to make their birthday a little bit more special. Sorry, I'm just gonna. We also, my notes aren't working now, of course. We also worked with the DOS District Squamish Emergency Program and the OCs from last year. Had collaborated with under one roof, developing policies and guidelines. And we also documented some, or developed some restorative justice contacts with the North Shore Restorative Justice Program. And we're setting out some guidelines and MOUs for that. Working with other community stakeholders to build the resiliency, and then starting our community consultation groups with a strategic plan in place. Next slide. One more. Next slide, please. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. And then obviously with this education and prevention side, we're learning to build more bridges with the program that we've continued on. Obviously, we can do that internally with any workshops, but we're hoping to get that back up and going. And then various days throughout the year where we can participate at the detachment as a group to celebrate Orange Shirt Day, Pink Shirt Day, show our support for those sorts of initiatives. We did a lot of webinars throughout the year, mental health training and unconscious bias training. And then we're looking to also obviously promote our Garage 529 again once the community is back and everybody's getting out and getting on board. I think there's a large uptick in bike sales last year, so that program is probably going to be helpful in the coming months and years when we can start doing some on-site registrations. And then just healthy relationship presentations, and then trying to be available for the schools. Next slide, please. Investing in our people, it's an important pillar for performance plan, sets up members for success. When we have a work plan in place to further their development and build healthy strategies and create positive work environments. We did this through positive 1004s, which are reports that we write up for any good deeds. We do commendations for the members as well, just to showcase and highlight the good work that they're doing. We also do that in various ways. A lot of the times we share equipment. We've had to rethink that with COVID and start to issue personal equipment and life-saving equipment, really. So trauma kits, carbine slings, headlamps, that sort of thing. It goes a long way for the members' positivity. And securing PPE, that was a tough one for everybody at the start of the pandemic, especially for us. We didn't have any downtime trying to get our head wrapped around safety protocols and dealing with folks on a day-to-day basis and how to do that safely. So that was pretty stressful for us in the interim and of the pandemic, and as it was for everybody. And we really saw resiliency in our members as they progressed through that. There's constable committees in both north and south zones, and we started up yearly health checks with our members, which isn't done in a lot of places. And just before the pandemic hit last year, we had yearly wellness checks with some local folks that we have designated to speak to our members. So we, asked for their time to go do it, because a lot of the time we don't get a chance to talk to anybody. So that was a super important initiative, and we're looking to move that forward. And then promoting a dedicated resource to build healthy workplace and a safe workplace, not alone for our members, but for our admin staff. That's important pieces as well. Next slide, please. We're also looking to further develop crime analyst business case. We're starting a pilot project in Squamish with one of the ME members, employees. And so this is super important to lead our intelligence-led policing, where a dedicated crime analyst can really pinpoint and strategically identify areas of concern or risk for us to explore. Continue to host mental health and wellness days and training days. As I said, it's COVID dependent, but we were able to get outside and have some pretty strict COVID protocols in place. Did some avalanche training. We were able to hold a bike course, so you'll see a lot more people downtown, members downtown on bikes this summer, hopefully, if everything's going well, and really support the ME and PSE local admin training as well. Next slide, please. We'll just go through some of the highlights. We had some property crime. Our GIS team was involved with a large file up in the Squamish Valley. It's of significant value, I guess, which stood out. So the boat up in the corner there came from Airdrie, Alberta. It was stolen from an older couple that resided there and made its way to the Squamish Valley. And with that, our GIS Serious Crime Section started an investigation with some good work from the public. And they worked with various agencies, including Airdrie, RCMP, BC Impact, and ICBC SIU to go through this project. And they recovered that 30-foot kingfisher, which was valued at about $280,000. And it was in the process of being revinned, repainted, and redeckled. So with the hopes of probably being re-registered as a BC vehicle, vessel. And then obviously with that up there in the valley, they issued 2 other search warrants for the same property, and they located an illicit cannabis grow operation valued at about $100,000. My GIS team was also busy with the gondola being cut for the second time, which has impacted the community as a whole, and the members who are continually working on that right now. It's a priority for them, and it's their #1 file that they're working on currently. We also saw a higher number of volume of visitors last year. We put significant pressure on our local area resources. We continually partner with BC Conservation Office, Parks, Natural Resource Office, Bylaws, Forestry, and DFO to conduct seasonal patrols, which was the case this weekend as well. Which was, yeah, the amount of people in the valley this weekend was probably threefold the normal amount of people. Some of the local officers that have been up there for a long time with forestry and conservation were pretty beside themselves with how many people were up there this weekend. And the increased visitor traffic, we saw a larger number of people on the roadways as well. So there's a few, quite a few impoundments that were made for vehicles speeding, which flows into the road safety. So our area of jurisdiction goes from Lions Bay to the Big Orange Bridge. We have a presence on that, and it's a shared presence with our BC Highway Patrol members that work out of the office. There's 5 of them. The increased planning and seasonal presence in the backcountry, as I mentioned, is also a priority, as is winter tire checks. We've made that a priority in the winter, starting in October's to make motorists aware of the change and the requirements. The highway can change. The highway conditions can change rapidly, and the appropriate tires are needed. Next slide, please. Perfect. Corporal Krummer spearheaded internal pilot program with the North Shore Restorative Justice Program. If you're not familiar with that, it aims at focusing on the harms caused by crime, work with the restoration of the victims, and support the offenders so they understand the harm that they've caused. We feel that as a detachment, this is an important initiative. We've entered into an MOU with North Shore Restorative Justice on a temporary basis to provide service to Squamish currently on a limited capacity. It's more of a pilot project, and we're looking for referrals, which we've had some. So this diverts crime from the criminal courts and put the focus back on the survivor victim offender relationship and the harm that they've caused. There's a high impact with that, and victim services helps out and plays a critical role in that as well. Just on the victim services front, we just hired a new detachment coordinator in the middle of last year, Shauna Bain. She comes from Mission, very well organized, and she's put some polishing touches on our victim services program currently, and she's a great driver of that. Plays a critical role in the functioning of the detachment while helping survivors of trauma cope through difficult situations. Since she started to the end of April of this year, so our fiscal, we've had 151 new victim referrals. So as an average, there's about 70 to 80 open files in any given month because of the different processes that they go through. So some might be court related, some might not be, but they take time, and she's a great resource to come into our office. And then finally, for the community, we had a big year. It was big in terms of building partnerships with the Bridge Shelter and Helping Hands, and helping that transition, and eventually the opening of Under One Roof, and applying some MOUs. And Corporal Krummer was working with their working groups all through the year to make that happen. And having the Under One Roof come into our briefing sessions to help understand what their facility is about, and having tours of the building, which is it really helped us understand what's happening there, and supporting them. Next slide, please. Just some community photos there to break that up. And then we'll head into the crime statistics. So if you could skip to one more, please. Thank you. Increase in certain crimes in 2019. The scoring has changed nationally. So founded occurrences as of January 19 include offenses where it's been determined that the report of the incident did occur or was attempted, or there was no credible evidence to confirm that the incident did not take place. So if we couldn't prove that the reported matter did not happen, then we have to assume it to be true. So there's going to be a little bit of a jump in certain types of crimes, certain types of crime types, and which are reflected there on the screen. You can see assaults, sexual assaults, and uttering threats are what we found have definitely changed. Next slide, please. Last year, there was a larger than average increase in assaults, increasing 63% from the previous years, along with an increase of 84% in uttering threats. As you can see, domestic violence is up 50% over the last couple of years as well. Squamish saw 313 criminal charges laid last year, which range from serious assaults, threats, frauds, impaired operation of motor vehicles, and serious motor vehicle collisions, just to name a few. The assaults, it's significant change. We've had an increase in visitors to the area, which has driven some of that. Some of that's going to be COVID related, and all the stressors that come along with that as well. Next slide, please. Break and enter to businesses were up, and frauds were up significantly with CRA scams. I'm sure everybody has had a couple of those on their phones, leading the way. We do have initiatives with our local businesses. So normally in the CRA scams, these folks will ask for various types of gift cards, and they tell the victim to provide the PIN. Once they do that, there's no way to recover any of the funds from the gift cards. So we've worked really hard with our local businesses to have kind of a checks and balances in place, because these victims will go into a store and buy several $1,000s worth of various cards, and then provide the pins. And once that pin is gone, the money is gone as well. These investigations are difficult to track, as the suspects turn out to usually be overseas via different IPNs and computers and things. So it's important to stop that process as it happens. So we've had several successes, and we've identified that as a priority for some of the businesses in town here. Next slide, please. This is regarding the drug offenses. Obviously, you can see drug trafficking was up significantly. So this differs from simple possession files. With the CCLA legislation, obviously you can see their possession of cannabis has decreased significantly over the years. Sorry, my years got cut off. So your last category is 2020, and then it goes down from there: 2019, 2018, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. Of note on this slide is an increase in missing persons files, with more people recreating to the area, accessing the backcountry. We've had an increase in that. Increase in visitor populations is to be expected with the amount of people that we've had here. However, as you can see, there's a 23% increase in mental health related files. As we know, there's a lot of external stressors with the pandemic that have increased our members' response And we've partnered with our mental health clinicians in the corridor, which has been a priority for the detachments. And we've worked on de-escalation training internally. And we've even had Sea Sky Mental Health Services attend our watch briefings when it was safe to do so within our COVID protocols to provide further support and information to our members. There was also, with our missing persons, several major searches for missing persons last year that included Daniel Rioch out in January. Just wanted to bring some light towards that and reinitiate that search as it is ongoing investigation currently. We also had one with Darcy Wild in October. These searches last for many days, included hundreds of volunteers from the community, from local SAR teams. SAR teams from other jurisdictions came in to help out as well. Different agencies and resources were used. We're currently, these files are currently open, and if anybody has any information, we encourage them to contact the police. Other crimes, sorry, next slide. This is traffic safety, as we all know, with the ICBC refunds. Hopefully everybody got. The traffic collisions were down significantly. You might ask why there's a 0 category there. The ICBC reporting has changed as they were finding finding that even a headlight damaged was more than $1,000. So most things were over $1,000 when we were reporting on our collisions. So they upped the damage for our reporting to 10,000. So that's kind of explains the increase in that in those 2 categories. Yeah, with the vehicle traffic, collisions overall were down 14%, which is always fantastic. Probably supported by commuters not traveling to the city on the roadways. Next slide, please. This is an overall crime summary for statistics. Kind of important, draws my attention here is we've included priority 1 calls for service. So that's emergent situations where officers need to use their lights and sirens to attend to a call, which was up 18%. We almost had 600 of those files last year from the year before. So other federal statutes, we're getting more out on seasonal stuff, so we're doing some more boating act regulations, and we do have a police boat that we've acquired for provincial assets here that we can use out in the Howe Sound area. We have quite a few people trained on the boat now, so which is good. So we can check people at boat launches, do patrols with the DFO, and Natural Resource also has a boat. And we'd like to do joint patrols with conservation out there as well. Make sure the waterways are safe and everybody's protecting the environment. Next slide. Sorry, I'll have to go twice. So moving forward into 2021, as I mentioned earlier, we have a new strategic plan. We're just in the process of developing that. We have the arrival of a new inspector, Robert Dykstra. Sir, appreciate you being here today. And obviously work with our PHOs, our gang partners, doing corridor traffic enforcement, provincial agency partners. And we're looking to increase seasonal focused policing. That sticks out for me, especially after this weekend. The amount of people, I've never seen that many people up in the Squamish Valley and in our backcountry. It's a growing phenomenon, and people need to take care up there. We did see, and we had a report of 5 unattended wildfires, or fires. One looked like it was intentionally set. up there over the weekend. So it's very concerning for us, and we're looking to accurately and adequately support that, not just on long weekends, but the in-between weekends for the summer season. An increase in our community engagement and building resilient communities. This is working, with our community partners and developing our members under emergency management response. Just shortly before this, that came into play. I'm not sure if everybody heard all the sirens or not, but we had a major car crash at one of the local restaurants, which severed a gas main near a school. So it caused a bit of a stir downtown, lots of roads, evacuations, schools being put on lockdown, as it was a fairly large main break. So fire and Fortis showed up, and that emergency incident command was very important for that scenario and the flow of that. Everything's restored now. Everything's made safe. Fortis came and took care of that, so thank you. But it just goes to show that's an important piece for the collaborative incident command model with our fire partners and other wildfire season starting up here. Adapting to new COVID measures environments, obviously, with the vaccine rollouts, we're looking, that's looking super positive, getting our frontline members vaccinated, because we're dealing with the public every day, and figuring out what that looks like at the end of 2021 and as we move forward. So that's my presentation for now. Is there any questions?
Great, thank you, Staff Sergeant Bradley. Council, any questions? Councillor Anderson, and then Mayor Elliott.
Gareth Bradley, the council becomes informed of certain scenarios, not least from the RCMP, about patterns of, well, I'm going to focus on break and enter. And at the front line of addressing some of these situations are private security services. And one large block of land comes up in particular. I won't need to name it. But my question is, how would you describe your interface with those private security services? Because it would seem that there's a general context to the issues involved, that the crime issues and circumstances, but also in coordinating information exchange regarding them. So my question then is, do you have kind of tete-a-tetes with these private security services to address general patterns that do occur on large blocks of land or in neighborhoods where they are really at the front line of maintaining security observation?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question. I can't speak to specifics for businesses, but we do work closely with local business partners, and it's pretty intensive collaboration that we have. As far as general security for, like, checking malls and doors and things like that, it's a little bit less. So it's kind of industry specific, I guess you could say. But we encourage those folks to report anything they see. Even the littlest thing can turn out to be something of a crime spree or things like that. So on industry specific related items, we do work collaboratively with some businesses in town. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor Elliott.
Hi, good afternoon. So a couple of questions. You talked about building a business case for a crime analyst, but is that different than just a data analyst that could help us with understanding our stats locally, or is that the same position?
No, it's a different position altogether. there's tactical analyst, which is able to, it's a specialized training that they have to undertake, which they can gather crime data and map and plot trends, provide information and intelligence. It's just an easier way for us as frontline resources to go out and be able to specifically say, like, they have the analytics to do that, and for us as police officers on the front line, it's a little bit more challenging. So it's just a more streamlined approach and more efficient use of that skill set.
Okay, and so then are we still relying on Lower Mainland for any analyst support that we need locally in the corridor?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. You talk about mental health flag, and those are up 23%. What would fall into that character? Is that like a wellness check? What does that mean, a mental health flag?
Yeah, that mental health flag is wellness checks. So somebody's concerned about a family member, haven't heard from them, all the way up to persons called a suicide hotline, or needs assistance, or maybe there's a medical issue that we need to attend to through BC ambulance, those sorts of things.
Okay. And then I know a couple years ago, we had an issue with winter child checks happening on the Fridays of long weekends, and tried to get a satisfactory response about how we maybe do things a bit differently so that Squamish folks don't get caught in checks trying to get home to pick up kids from daycare, that sort of thing. So to me, that's still an outstanding conversation that I don't think we've worked out yet with the provincial resources that would conduct those tire checks. So I just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, we echo those concerns. I think some of us were caught up in that as well. So they've looked at that. They're well aware of that, and the Thanksgiving long weekend's probably not a good site for a weekend winter tire check. So just revamping and making sure that that those conversations are happening well in advance of that.
Yeah, thanks for the update.
So we can be prepared. Yeah, obviously, absolutely.
Next up, I have Councillor Stoner, followed by Councillor West. And Council, just keep in mind we're in overtime on this segment.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks so much for the extensive update. There's so much work going on. I did happen to venture up the Squamish Valley this weekend as well, and was baffled by the number of folks who were up there. And I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit to our approach for seasonal policing and the resources that we have, and how that gets divided up relative to local enforcement versus provincial resources.
Yep. So we do have some seasonal dollars, some overtime. Those are all overtime bodies. I don't know if you saw those members up there or not, but we're traveling all the way up to about the 53-kilometer mark of the Ilaho, which is that's a fair ways out there for us to go. Cell service and radio coverage is spotty, and we're dealing with those. That's where those fires were, right? Like it's very concerning for us to see that type of behavior happening up there. But as far as resources go, we have some seasonal dollars. The forestry for rec sites kicks in some money but again, there's no we don't have dedicated resources. It's all on overtime. So members sign up for those, and we have some operational plans, usually surrounding the long weekends, etc. As far as provincial bodies go, we have 3 provincial frontline resources in the detachment. Obviously, if there's a situation where there's involving a 2-member response, we need to attend up there.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Similar question. It's regard to members and how many you're able to actually have at a given time in the past year, and also going forward. I know when I was acting mayor, we had a short discussion about this, and there was, I can't remember exactly the numbers, but we were below complement. And And so I was wondering, is this a provincial problem? Is there more recruits coming out of depot now? How do you foresee 2021?
It's looking up currently. We've had a number of soft vacancies due to injury and some leave. So those folks have started to make their way back, and we're trying to set ourselves up with some extra resourcing asks as well. Every agency has long-term injuries where we can't fulfill those needs right now, but we're hoping to do that with some staffing increases.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. There's a lot to digest there. I'm going to pick up on one thing was around traffic enforcement, and you mentioned the return of a recently retired member. Could you speak a little bit about how enforcement's been handled in the last year and maybe potentially going forward? We do see a lot of requests in the public for enhanced enforcement in different areas of the community. So I was curious how that's being handled.
Yeah, we have to balance that, obviously. Look where our priorities are, look at the traffic data and the collision data, see where the hot spots are. We get those requests quite a bit through all of our various communities. We police from Lions Bay all the way up to Squamish Valley and out towards the highway and the Big Orange Bridge. So everywhere in between, we get a lot of requests from the citizens. So we have to balance that, and then internally look at where we're driving those traffic stats in versus responding to calls for service, etc. So with the reserve constable, we can target those priorities more as he's now officially back into a traffic position, so we can start to handle those requests, and then supplement that with the members going out on the road. For me, the priorities are safe routes to school and school zones, right? So during obviously school operating hours. So hopefully that's not taking away from the other targeted enforcement on various streets and areas, which will now be handled by our local reservist.
Thank you.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of questions. One, you mentioned, upcoming, thinking about LNG as a major event and so on. Do we have a sense of what portion of our resources that the Fortis and wood fiber projects have been taking up sort of over the last couple of years?
Just my time. Yeah, I've been attending the meetings to help organize and understand what the project is, to help develop resource plans and an operational plan from my standpoint. It's important to me to know what their emergency plans are, and so we can collaborate on if there is an incident, we can have a response plan. But yeah, right now it's my time attending meetings. Obviously they haven't happened for some time, but I suspect that that will increase as the year goes on.
Great, thank you. And the other one, and maybe this goes to the mayor's question about a data analyst. Just with some of the numbers, they seem small. I'll use that word carefully. And so a small change then looks percentage-wise like a big change. So
yeah,
I think you mentioned assaults. That was a significant change you noticed.
Yeah.
Is there anything else jumping out at you, or do you have a sense how we compare per capita to other areas in BC right now?
Similar. Well, I mean, locally, if we want to compare, like maybe Whistler is a similar regional area. Most of their things categories have decreased just because of volume, visitor volume. But we kind of went the opposite way last year. I can't speak for Burnaby or anything like that. I'd have to take a little bit of an in-depth look. But locally, the assaults and those things. But you're right. Some of the smaller items that may go from 1 to 2 look a little bit daunting on the map there, or on the spreadsheet. But yeah, geographically speaking, we did see quite an increase compared to Whistler or any other region locally.
Okay, thank you.
And just one from me, I think it's quick. Going back to Councillor Race's question about our numbers within the detachment and comparing to other detachments across the province, I didn't necessarily hear the answer to that. Are most or a lot of other detachments experiencing similar drops in numbers to what we're seeing, or are we an anomaly?
Yeah, there is definitely a staffing shortage, you know, with COVID and depot shut down. So that does have a little bit of a ripple effect. Internally, for us to get members is not an issue. It's just a matter of whether or not those, you know, again, can't predict any injury or illness or things like that. That's why I call them soft vacancies. We don't have any hard vacancies. We're fully staffed currently. It's just a matter of if those people can go out into the road to do day-to-day policing. If not, then they're redirected in the office.
Okay, very good. Staff Sergeant Bradley, thank you very much. And Inspector Dykstra, we didn't hear from you a lot, but we appreciate that you're part of the presentation and joining us today.
Thank you very much. You're going to get a chance to hear from me quite a bit more as the year goes on. I'm looking forward to meeting and chatting with you all. I'll be doing this presentation next year, take the pressure off of Gareth there. And good job, and thanks for all the information, and we'll talk soon.
Great, and we certainly look forward to working with you as you get up to speed. And thanks again for joining us.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time.
So the next item on our agenda is, again, under staff reports, item number 2, Brennan Park Fields and Lands Master Plan. Oh, and Tim Hoskins, the Director of Special Projects and Initiatives, is with us. Thank you, Tim. Am I handing it over to you at this point?
Thank you. Sorry for my presentation, which just went a little crazy. Hello everyone. My name is Tim Hoskin. I'm Director of Special Projects and Initiatives, and really excited to be able to share the Brennan Park Master Plan with you today. It's been a long time in the making, and I know the community is really excited about it. It really is their plan. They built it with staff facilitation, and I'm excited to share with you. Okay, is it up and showing?
No, not yet.
Share.
Now we have it.
I have it. Excellent. Thank you. So we first, to start off, the master plan acknowledges that our community works and plays in the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. The master plan holds space for the Squamish Nation to enter into partnerships with the district and other community agencies, such as, I think there's a great opportunity with the lacrosse court to work with the Squamish Nation. The purpose of the master plan is over time, the Brennan Park has developed with a lot of input and support from volunteers, and has really developed organically. And the master plan provides us an opportunity to move forward with intent with community groups and develop in a very thoughtful way. And with that in mind, we had a little bit of history here. As I mentioned, Brennan Park was made possible by volunteers. The visions and values was created in the, if you remember, in 2018, the Recreate Your Future Brennan Park, which we had incredible community buy-in and surveys and open houses. And the vision and values council has seen a few times now. We also did an EOI to see if there was any interest from private partnerships and from community groups to operate at Brennan Park Recreation Center, as well as Brennan Park Fields and Lands. We did get a few responses, which we'll dive into later. The real estate and facility strategy, of course, touches on it, and we did a full field usage audit to try to understand how much of our fields were being used. We dived into several great engagements with the community that were a lot of fun, and council did endorse the key concepts out of the master plan back in fall of or June 2020. And those were taken back to the community to get input. The ideas brought forward by the community were then incorporated into the final master plan that's in front of you today. So the vision, council in our community has seen this quite a few times. Yeah, I won't spend too much time on that one. Values. We heard strongly from our community and from council that affordable programs and services are extremely important, that whatever we do can be accessed by everyone, that it's inclusive and accessible, and that we develop our facilities in such a way that they help us develop healthy community and people. Another key value is the shared use of facilities. In essence, this means that nobody gets their own facility anymore. They must share and open it up to the public. And of course, the consideration of the
Excuse me, Tim. The slides aren't advancing. I think they should be. I think we're stuck on one slide. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, thank you. I don't know why that would be.
Thanks for your patience. We have sorted out the technical issues, and Mr. Hoskin is going to pick up at this screen here, talking about values.
Thank you. My apologies for the technical glitch, and yeah, I'll jump right back in. We were talking about values. Here they are. You should be able to see them now. What came up as important to our community was that our programs are affordable and that they're accessible and inclusive to anyone. And that our community, that we emphasize healthy community and individuals, shared use of facilities, and this is important, that to maximize space and reduce cost, existing and new facilities should be accessible to various community groups. An example would be a field wouldn't be built for single usage or a dome put in place that can be accessed by different folks. And of course, in alignment with our green values is a consideration of the natural environment. Next slide, please. Along with the values with our community, we looked at the constraints, things that basically defining what our sandbox is and what is possible. Our buildings would need to be developed to withstand the flood. Brennan Park is used as a floodway in case of a major flood event and water needs to flow through. So to accommodate that, buildings need to be built to withstand a potential flood, and that's per our flood management bylaw, and maintain the integrity of the critical floodway, and we developed some proposed solutions. Next slide, please. So the solutions were Zone A, B, and C. Zone A, permanent buildings can be built there. Zone B, only small structures that allow water to go through. And Zone C has a higher environmental standard than Zone A or Zone B. Next slide, please. And this is the illustration of the Brennan Park floodway management zoning. So essentially, Brennan Park acts like the bow of a boat, and buildings are allowed in behind it, but not creating a dam across B and C. Next slide, please. Other constraints are from the real estate and master plan is that the district should explore alternative funding through sponsorships, private and public partnerships, grants, and fundraising. There's a limited amount of funding available, so it needs to be focused. Next slide, please. Other constraints is the land Brennan Park is on was a sponsorship or a sponsored Crown grant, which means anything that goes on at Brennan Park must be recreation based, must be nonprofit, or have an offsetting social value. Thank you. So what we heard, next slide, please. We had exceptional community engagement. We heard from a lot of our stakeholders, and they're listed here. Next slide, please. Here's some the pictures of the participation. We had a lot of fun. We put out in these very large maps and worked with the community, working from long-term goals to short-term goals of how to put all the facilities that were wants or needs from the community onto Brennan Park. And although we were broke up into many different groups, when we put all the maps up on the wall, it was very similar themes to all the groups of what they came up with. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And just more community engagement. As you can see, a lot of community engagement went on. So what did we hear? We heard that sports arts culture has immense value. New facilities are expensive and there's not enough funding available to meet all needs. Operating additional facilities is of course expensive. Stakeholders wish to be involved with decision making, and there's a desire for certainty.
We lost Mr. Hoskin. Council, we will try and track down Mr. Hoskin. They have to join by phone. Shall we call another 5-minute recess? Council, we'll take another 5-minute recess while we see if we can reconnect with Mr. Hoskin.
Oh, I have you guys back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Bit of a technical rough day here. My apologies. I think we're okay to advance the slide. Stakeholder consensus. So we were able to land on consensus with the stakeholders, and they supported maximizing the use of existing facilities, implementing a shared use of facilities, and an alternative funding model. Next slide, please. So after community engagement, so the key concepts were sent out to the community, and from a survey, this is what has changed since the last time council has seen the plan. An off-leash dog park was added near the gravel field. It will not impact the use of the field or future development. The question area allows for a covered space subject to it not impacting the floodway. The Sorka Bike Skills Park is clarified that it will stay in place for 20+ years. A covered area was added to the summer zone, and lacrosse and basketball were added near the tennis courts, and the expanded parks use within the greenhouse area. Next slide. The long-term goals, I won't list these off. Maybe we'll advance to the maps. Next slide, please. So we start with the long-term goals so that it was clear to the community of where the short, medium,
Mr. Hoskin definitely has got a bit of an internet connectivity issue at his end. Tim, can you hear us?
I can. Should we carry on, or should I call in, or I think we're...
Let's try having you turn your video off and see if that does anything to improve your stability. And we'll just work with your lovely voice.
Okay, I'm stopping video now. I'm not sure when I lost you. I'm assuming you had a chance to look at the map of long term. Next slide, please. Our medium-term goals, it starts getting really busy after about 5 years. Next slide. And the map certainly starts cleaning up or filling up. So what you, no major changes here from what you saw last time, but with the addition of the basketball and lacrosse courts. Next slide, please. Short-term goals. And now we're getting pretty filled up here. And so we're adding a summer zone, which includes a splash park, beach volleyball, the fenced dog park near the gravel field, and expanding the public works yard in the greenhouse area. Next slide, please. So land use agreements, this goes back to the alternative funding model where field users or the new bubbles around a enclosed field or bike skills park, they would apply to the district for long-term lease or license, and they must demonstrate the following that you see here. The key one is that they demonstrate the social value of their proposal, of their facility, and that they meet the key benchmarks, the key values that are outlined in the master plan. So district staff would first meet with the proponents. We would set the key performance indicators and a contract review timeline, develop targets, and make a recommendation to council for or against adoption. Next slide, please. So land use agreements, there are two that we will likely see pretty quickly. Council has seen these, but they need to be amended to meet the master plan vision and values. Is the indoor field, multi-use soccer field, and an indoor bike park. Thank you. Next slide. Nonprofit, adaptive sport, which has access to sport equipment, very noble endeavor. The Sorka Bike Park, the BMX Park, Logger Sports and Events Grounds, and equestrian. Next slide. There are some points of note. The campground would move to the area north and west of equestrian and would be events based. And the legacy lands. We did include the legacy lands community group as part of the conversation, as there was interest by many of the community members on, well, what about that land over there? Is that possible? So we did have conversation with them, and there was interest by Sorka to develop facilities there. Next slide, please. Recommendation that the District of Squamish endorse the key concept, endorse, I'm sorry, that one was, but endorse the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoskin. So are we moving on to
Can we go
questions
back
now?
one? There we go.
Sir, did you want us to revisit that last slide, or are you ready?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
I see Councillor Rice. Go ahead, please. Then followed by Councillor Stoner and Anderson.
Thank you. So thank you, Tim. The question I had was around the land use agreements process, and you'll probably recall as well, over the last couple of terms, we've had, to my recollection, at least 2 proposals by private businesses or proposed businesses for some kind of a facility. And my recollection was one was soccer and one was bike oriented, to have a bubble or some facility and so forth. But the long and the short of it was that they needed a long-term commitment, and they also would require subdivision, because a key part of their proposal would be that they would finance against the land. In other words, there'd be a mortgage against their parcel, a mortgage against the lease. And the reality of it, and I'm a little bit removed from it, but any kind of a lease over 3 years of vacant land or bare land, as opposed to a portion of a building, requires subdivision. So the first question is, are there any impediments to subdivision? Like, for example, up in the airport, we have the debris flow hazard stopped us from subdividing up in that place. And the second thing is, are we prepared to entertain proposals that might involve financing against our land? And are we prepared to enter long-term leases to allow that, which not all private operations would require, but I think many would. And so I think going forward, and when I saw this, I mean, I'll leave it as a question, but my thought is that we need to flesh that out a little bit more. And when you're talking about nonprofits, and the report mentions that there's some of them that also want long-term commitments, I'm assuming that they would not be financing against the land, and therefore may not require leases. They might be able to get away with a license, and it's something I guess our legal counsel can advise us on. It's the same sort of a long-term commitment, but without the technical interest in land. So those are the questions around, did we think about that, and how do we go forward with that?
Thank you, Councillor Race. Through the chair, the applicants are certainly aware of the constraints on the land base, and part of the process is through the application is to address any concerns, bring forward exactly what they want, because it's difficult to, until we've had the master plan in place, it's difficult to know where they were going to go. Now that we know where the good fit is, where they can go, they can revise their application and bring it to council and address, with real estate's involvement and legal counsel's involvement, address those questions and concerns that we have. But until we see their application with their revised location and the revised approach, we can't answer that specifically. The short answer is we think it's doable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gone through the process with them and included them as part of the community engagement. But they have some work to do in developing their business plan and application to fit within our rules and guidance. And that's where real estate would step in and provide more expertise if council requires it.
Anything else, Councillor Race? Okay, Councillor Stoner, please.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Hoskin, I appreciate this has been a longer term project and different forms of community engagement have occurred, but our last survey that occurred in November only saw a 27% completion rate. And I'm curious how quickly did we lose people through that survey and why we weren't seeing a higher level of completion? Was it just too complex, and do we feel like that was actually adequate response rate for that survey?
Yeah, I think it's just fatigue. We advertised extensively, and the chief, we put out through the recreation newsletter, and other used our stakeholders to get the word out. But yeah, there wasn't a huge uptake in the survey, and I guess the key one I would read into that is there's been lots of opportunity to feed into the master plan, and I guess the sense I've got from everyone is let's just get on with it, and can we get the facilities going?
Okay, so I feel like there's two components that we have received a fair bit of feedback on in recent months that I feel like weren't totally captured. So we've received a whole bunch of emails with respect to increasing playground space in this area. And I think that those were forwarded to staff, and if those have been considered in this process. And then as well, what sort of outreach was done with regards to campground users, in particular Tourism Squamish or other campground operators, in terms of the value of having a municipal campground?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stoner. The master plan has a few locations identified, or 2 locations identified for playgrounds, but it also emphasizes that as opportunities develop to add picnic areas, playground areas, potentially washrooms throughout Brennan Park, where needed and where feasible. I think the number one playground we heard is to expand the one near the recreation center as a destination playground, as well as to develop playgrounds near Hendrickson Field and other kind of key destination spots. So I guess the feeling was that while one kid's potentially playing soccer or a parent is playing softball, that the children could go play at the playground and be within sight and close proximity to the parents. Regarding the campground, we did not engage directly with campground users, except for the stakeholders such as softball and soccer, who have predominantly used the campground for their events and for parking. When it comes to tourists and others using the campground, the separate process that has been going on in parallel around camping throughout the district took the lead on that, and there has been conversations around that. There is what's contemplated in the master plan is to move the camping area and make it events based, but near the equestrian center. So it's still possible that it could have the similar type of camping that we have now, but the recommendation is that it moves towards events based only.
Thanks, Councillor Stoner. Next I have Councillor Anderson.
Sure. I wonder if I may ask, first of all, with you is, will you have another round of comments? I would maybe wish to offer a few brief comments. Will you have another round for specifically comments? Or would you like me to address?
Of course. Are you referring to comments on doing an update to the master plan, or?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hoskins. I was posing a question to the chair as to
how
he
I'm sorry.
between questions and comments.
Yeah, I prefer that you hold your comments, Councillor Anderson, and I'll cycle through the questions.
We'll stick to questions then. I have 2, Mr. Hoskins. First of all, if we may refer to your map, I'm sure that we've all have built a familiarity with it. The delineation, the proposed delineation, I'm looking at area A for the between the Logger Sports Events Theatre and the parking. in the map that you have, and I respect that this may be subject to all kinds of things, but it runs right through the buildings. Is there a particular intention that you have in that delineation for either medium or long term, if you like?
A good question. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. How this evolved around the logger sports is we posed the question to the stakeholders is how much space do you need? Are you able to condense your area, or do you need to expand your area, and when? And out of that, logger sports identified the key core areas that are important to them that that they must hold on to, so to speak. Out of the stakeholder engagement, that area that is now vacant was originally contemplated for the equestrian bubble or facility, their covered riding area. We did an on-site with equestrian and logger sport, and that area was identified as being too subject to flooding, and a lot of dirt would need to be brought in there to be developed. So we were able to move equestrian back to their existing license area with the caveat that whatever they build must allow the floodwaters to go through. So to answer your question, no, it's not set. That area is available. If Logger Sports wants to bring forward in their application that's part of their long-term lease, they can show that, hey, this is needed and this is why. Or it could be, if they don't need it on an ongoing basis, they can have it for events and when it's ever needed for a short term. But if they don't need it, then it would be available for whatever community decides in the future.
Thank you. My follow-up question is really flowing from your comments you've just made, and I'm going to describe a set of circumstances, and my question is, what do we do about this? And I think that you partly answered the question, but I just was looking for some reassurance or a pathway. I have been an observer. I've attended more logger sports than I care to say, because it will date me very badly. But I have been an observer and a sometime volunteer in the logistics behind the show. And so,
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
Yeah, your volume is a little bit low. Wonder if you might just project a bit.
Thank you. I'll do my best, Chair. I'll get closer to the mic if you like. One of the things I've noted in your presentation, in the written part of it, and I do appreciate how you've conveyed the stakeholder engagement and the stakeholder interviews. It really helps us to build a picture, and we are dealing with hundreds of people in multiple organizations. It's important for us. But I note that there was no discussion of the logistical arrangements behind the logging show each summer. And in fact, for several weeks between May and August, that parking lot becomes a log sort. And because they're handling all of the wood twice, 5 logging truck loads in the southern part of that parking lot. And this is for not only all of the events, but the Rotary Barbecue, the chipping that takes place later. There's a lot of activity there, and it takes over a several-week period. And it seems you're indicating that there may be some arrangements to accommodate this, but I'd just like to highlight that it's not noted. And I'm really kind of pointing the finger at the stakeholders. They do need to bring this information forward. So the grass cannot be used for this logistics. And Councillor Herford will have a better appreciation of this, but there's water and electronics and all kinds of stuff, infrastructure under that grass. But there isn't, you need to have room for truck turning, for machinery turning. And so we shouldn't underappreciate the need they will have for a portion of that parking lot, in particular, say the southern part of it. So my question is, what do we do about this? Are you suggesting that the pathway is open to Logger Sports Squamish Days to offer a proposal with a rationale that would explain these circumstances?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson, through the chair. The parking area is certainly recognized that it is important to logger sports. And as you mentioned, it is used a few weeks of the year, but the rest of the time, it is not. The thought is to bring it under district administration, and for when it is needed by logger sports, there would be no change. They would be able to use it and secure it for their event. But when it's not being used by logger sports, it would be administered by the district and open to the public for parking. As we're developing various facilities in the area, and as things get busier and busier, it is the opportunity that the gate would be open and opportunity for the public to park there and to use the space. It is an open invitation as well, as you indicated, that through their application process, if they identify, whoa, that doesn't work for us, we need it year round, then it is something that should be contemplated by the district. But at this point, the recommendation is that until it's demonstrated or a requirement by logger sports, that it's administered by the district and open to the whole community.
Thank you, Mr. Hoskins.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. On the maps, area C and B seem to overlap right where Henderson Field expansions is highlighted as a future. But can you explain that course? In the south must be the sort of southwest corner, and it just seems to, I'm not quite clear what's happening there. It seems to be an overlap. Are they classified? Is there a zone there that's classified both C and B? And what are the challenges in that particular area? I just didn't understand it from the mapping.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Herford. The answer is we don't quite know. It requires more study because of the riparian area in there. What we expect, the answer is that yes, we can expand Hendrickson Field is the likely scenario, but how expensive that is or how many trade-offs with the riparian area it needs to be studied more before there's a definitive answer. So the dashed lines indicate that it is really a bit of both, and until we have some more information through a study when we're ready to expand, that will be able to identify for sure that it's doable. It's a bit more complex than the terms of reference of the master plan.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful to add a definition for that zone that says something along those lines. Further study required, just to make sure that we're communicating clearly to the community what their expectations should be. Would be a. But thank you for that explanation. I'm curious, trees at or near the proposed water feature, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to if we're planning on retaining some or all, or I know there's a road alignment that could change in there, and just how that all sort of fits together.
Good question. The hope is that through a road alignment, little or no trees would need to be moved for a splash park. Of course, it also depends how large a splash park is decided to be put in there. So ideally, with road realignment, no trees would be impacted. If that's not the case, we could look at another spot or potentially removing some trees, but certainly to fall within the value of protecting the environment, that would not be the ideal scenario.
Thank you. I have some more, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, carry on, please.
Thank you. On one of the maps, it says over the Sorka Skills Park, which we were told in the presentation will be there for 20 plus years. It says rec center expansion to be decided, and I just wondered if that was still appropriate given the length of term that we're hearing that the Sorka Skills Park is going to remain there.
Yes, the idea being that we want Sorka to be in there as long as possible, but we also want to make sure it's understood that with the limited building opportunities within Zone A and the proximity to the recreation center, that perhaps in 20 plus years, 30 years, we may need that spot for for future rec center development. It's currently not within any plans. The circa could be there 30 years, but we just wanted to make sure it was clear to Sorka that we may need that spot back in long-term future.
Okay, and I have one more, which I think Councillor Anderson touched on, which is the map lines seem to go through some buildings particularly in relation to Squamish Days, and I was just curious if there's a more detailed map, or if we're working off the existing fence lines, or I just want to make sure we're not setting ourselves up for some conflict here. How are those lines drawn?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. It is a very broad-based map and doesn't go into a lot of detail. The level of detail for logger sports and other facility development will come within their applications. So I would expect that logger sports, and we can certainly make a small adjustment on the map here to accommodate that. But if they need to keep those buildings or important buildings, they don't, then they would bring that forward in their application, and then they would have a lease over that area.
Okay, so those lines are potentially adjustable as you going forward as we enter into these agreements, is what you're saying?
Precisely.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me now. Thank you.
Mayor Elliott, followed by Councillor Pettingill.
Thank you, and I apologize if there's construction noise in the background. Getting a new roof, which was supposed to start tomorrow. So one thing I wanted to ask Mr. Hoskin is that the courts, pickleball, tennis, are kind of in the A zone, but kind of in the B zone. And I know the pickleballers, especially as well as some tennis players, would really like to see a bubble so that they can play year round. And we haven't been able to accommodate them within Brennan Park, the pickleballers, because of just how busy it is. So given those courts span B and A, can we create covered structures for the courts so that we can play court sports year round?
Short answer is yes. Any buildings that go up in the B zone, they just need to be built to allow for a flood to go through. So it may not necessarily be a bubble. It could be a steel frame structure or steel roof. There's, for example, Equestrian solved their issues by changing their building design for the covered area to be able to fit within B. So yes, it's possible. These lines aren't definitive and could be adjusted accordingly if it's felt that we needed to fit a bubble in. They are pretty broad-based, but it is important, overall to fit within the values of and the constraints of the master plan.
Okay, it's because the document sort of says it's up to these groups to fundraise to make their projects happen. So I'm just wondering if we're raising the bar for them by putting them in an area where they're going to have to raise a lot more money to put a covered structure in versus something else.
I guess short answer is if they're building within B, there could be some additional costs. I don't think that's necessarily a given, and there may be room within what's defined here as Zone A for a bubble. Saying these are pretty broad-based maps, and once you get into the detail, there is quite a bit of room in that area. Or it could go over existing courts.
Yep, fair enough. The line splits the existing courts too, so I just wanted to make sure that that is carefully considered. Because we ask our sports teams to, raise money and just don't want to raise that bar too high. The other thing that council's talked about for the Brennan Park expansion is childcare. And what I'm not seeing prioritized here is outdoor space that would support a childcare facility.
So I believe that would be covered spaces in playground. So there is a covered space identified in the summer zone. And that would be used for additional programming. It's identified as covered programming space in the summer zone. So the idea for camps, potentially daycare, and others that there's space for outdoor use, as well as the recreation center expansion. Ultimately, we'll have some outdoor space if all goes well, if that's the covered sails or fixed roof, but there'll be additional covered space at the recreation center expansion.
I just want to make sure that we connect with planning to make sure that we are planning for a licensed daycare that would meet the requirements, the licensing requirements for so many square feet per kid, square meters per kid. It often needs to be fenced. It often, needs to meet those requirements. I don't see that here, and I think for the benefit of our community, we should try and identify that. I don't know, maybe it's allowed to be a shared zone, but I didn't think so. I thought it had to be at least for the daycare's use during the day. So that's just something that I would like us to consider before we finalize this. The other piece is we talk in the report about the legacy lands, but they're not on any of the maps. And so it would be interesting to just include a sense of what the options are for the legacy lands as an appendix to this, or as a follow-on map. Because they are mentioned in the report. Is that possible?
Oh, yes, Mary Ellen, certainly we can identify on the map where legacy lands are, and that they're open to applications for recreation use. It was outside of the scope to identify what uses could be there. We thought it was important to include them as part of the conversation with stakeholders so they could make those connections with others and see what was a good fit. But ultimately, we didn't assign the best usage over their space.
Okay. My last question is just the in working with the equestrian groups, do people transport their horses there, or do we believe that stables close by will remain stables as development continues in our community? I'm just trying to understand the longevity of that area within this plan.
The equestrian society is adamant that they can grow their sport. They do bring in trailers, and they do bring in local horses. Certainly, the neighboring stables don't seem to be growing, but bringing in horses by trailers could grow. Ultimately, it will be council's decision. Once equestrian develops their master plan, it's important that they demonstrate their sustainability and longevity, and that this is a viable use of district land, and will be there for the term of their license. So there is opportunity for greater scrutiny of their development and their license, and this creates a pathway for them to demonstrate that for you.
Thank you, Chair.
Next is Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. And just for so it's clear to everyone, if we decide to endorse this, we're not endorsing that the idea that we're going to start taxing people for all of these things. It's just we like the layout, but the community groups and so on are still going to have to figure out largely how to fund a lot of these, and we will do some of that work too. But there's no sort of funding commitment at this point. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, Councillor Pettingill.
Okay, thank you. And then just trying to understand, we've applied for grants for rec center expansion, haven't been successful. I'm assuming that if grants come up again, we wouldn't wait 20 years. We would probably jump on that now. And so that could really shift the timelines. And so, assuming that's correct, then things may need to move around, and so if Sorka has to go in 3 years because we get a grant, does everyone else assume that their plan is fixed for the next 20 years and it's only Sorka that needs to find a new space, or might we presume that we need to do some reorganization within this plan at that point?
Yeah, to understand your question, what I'm hearing is there flexibility in the plan to adjust with fiscal opportunities and kind of the bumping dominoes that might happen. The answer is yes. The idea is to provide guidance. This isn't completely prescriptive of we're going to build this in 5 years, 10 years. It's very much subject to available fundraising and budgets and the success of community groups to make it happen. The idea is to provide some guidance on how this could potentially roll out, but it doesn't handcuff council or the community if opportunities come available.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had is just how we are aligning this with our arts, culture, and heritage strategy and plans. And as I understood this proposal, there wasn't as strong a push for arts and culture and heritage facilities here. My presumption, and maybe it's not correct, but that's because it's more feeling that they don't belong at this site, but they're still just as desired. And so did we dig into that, or assuming that's true, how are we sort of making sure that we're balancing these priorities and finding space for arts, culture, and heritage, as well as these other more sport-based rec interests as we're planning? And maybe a lot of the arts, heritage, and culture would rather be downtown, but the land isn't there, so we actually do need to sort of allocate some space here. Or have we thought about those sorts of things?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the Arts Council was heavily involved as a stakeholder and provided great insight. And what you're saying is true. There is a preference to be downtown, but there's strong encouragement from the district through staff to engage, especially with logger sports, on managing events and supporting events and making them more of a multiple type of event that can be accommodated there. And logger sports had great uptake on that. Arts Council had great uptake, and what that could potentially look like is an outdoor stage that could accommodate both uses and greater integration of the groups and making really good use of that space. It's to everyone's advantage, and everyone seems to be on board.
Okay, thanks. And I just to be clear though, I'm thinking as well, not just performance space, but programming space and creation space and that sort of thing. And just wanting to make sure that we're giving that sort of thing adequate attention in all of this.
Yes, a little outside of the scope of the Fields and Lands Master Plan, but especially in the recreation sector, there will be a focus, and through recreation services, certainly a strong focus on arts programming that is throughout our planning and our facility development. So yeah, I strongly expect that as our community evolves, there'll be and develops facilities that there'll be multiple places for arts, if it's whatever type of mode that might be, from dance to painting, pottery, and make it a great social environment.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Anderson, I saw your hand, and I have a question myself. Mr. Hoskin, it's another map overlap question. And I see that the proposed off-leash dog park and the running track intermingle on two sides. And I'm thinking that maybe that is just the map isn't quite as precise because this is high level. So could you maybe just talk a little bit about what the thought is there, and will the running track and the dog park intermingle and overlap with each other?
You're dead on. The developing of the maps and the lines on the scale just creates some overlap. So the fenced dog park very likely won't take up this whole space identified, but that's the space that it can go in. So there's certainly considerations that we don't want to put in a dog park and then have it impacted by running track or updating the gravel field, that sort of thing. So those will all be considered when we develop the dog park.
Very good, thank you. And Councillor Anderson, did you have a final question?
I did a quick one, if you like, Chair. Mr. Hoskins, your report proposes that road realignment be considered at the north end of Brennan Park area in relation to the highway. Do you anticipate that these road realignment scenarios might come before the multimodal transportation plan, which the engineering department will be working on this year? Are we ready to bring them forward to that type of analysis?
I think it's preliminary conversations. It would make sense. To be honest, I don't know which one would come first, and we need to bring in our planning and engineering department to have a greater understanding of that. Yeah, the idea is that potentially there's a better realignment for transportation and for recreation and creating park space. So it should be explored. Is it doable? We don't know. Totally doable. We don't know at this point, but maybe that would be a great first step, is to have that conversation on the in that planning.
Thank you.
Mayor Elliott?
Mr. Hoskin, can you speak to the growth, stability, or decline in any of the sports that use this area? The trends that we're seeing? And what you expect perhaps going forward based on your consultations?
Yes. When it comes to, we did quite a bit of analysis around fields, and what we're seeing pretty much matches provincially and nationally. The biggest surprise was the decline of and how quickly on youth soccer. But we're also seeing fast growth on rugby, pickleball, and I think that's about it. Softball has been pretty steady, but in general, I think the main outcome we got out of the field audit is that there's capacity. We just need to be better at allocating the field use. One of the biggest things is improving, and we're on it now, it's happening right now, is the recreation software. This will allow the ability to, if somebody's not, to avoid the blanket bookings, so that community groups can see a field available and they can book it on the spot and use it. Yeah, so we seem to be, just in summary, matching the provincial and national norms. Some surprise on the decline of youth soccer, could just be a blip. Yeah, it did over the last couple of years, that decline.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just looking for clarification on the proposed shift of location for the campground. Does that make it impossible to use on its current kind of basis, in terms of it's still a fairly basic campground, but it does serve a fair amount of recreational tourists on an annual basis? Is that being completely removed off the table in these discussions, or is that still an option potentially going forward?
To make sure I understand your question, is the proposed event camping and parking being able to be developed to a higher standard as a campsite? It is possible, but it would be quite expensive. The farther away we are from Loggers Lane, the more expensive it is to bring in utilities to service it. So it is possible to put in a rustic campsite similar to what we have now on that site. But if we wanted it developed with hot showers and washroom facilities, that sort of thing probably would be cost prohibitive.
Thank you. Council, I would like to get to a motion. And I'm hearing a few things, specifically more study around that are more about the Hendrickson Field expansion situation and study required there, childcare component and legacy lands. So it sounds like we'll be going with the alternate motion. Would anybody like to put a motion on the floor? Council, what direction would you like to go? Councilor Anderson. We're not hearing you, Councilor Anderson.
I'm pleased to make that recommendation. Acting Mayor French, if I understand you rightly, the motion then would read that the District of Squamish endorse the Brennan Park Field Master Plan with the following amendments, and those amendments would concern Hendrickson Fields. Is this what you suggest? And that element is clear to Mr. Hoskins and the minutes. I may need some help with the wording here.
Sure. So I specifically noted Hendrickson Field expansion details, childcare details, and legacy lands. Councilor Rice.
Yeah, thank you. Two comments about that. One is the legacy lands are actually leased to a private society, Sea to Sky Nordic, so we don't technically control it apart from zoning issues. But so I'm not sure we need to sort of consider it. I know there's a discussion in the report about it, but it's sort of, it would be nice if Sorka could find a place there perhaps. But the other issue, and I'll speak to it in the motion, is with respect to criteria around long-term leasing or licensing to private operators and nonprofits.
Mayor Elliott.
I just I sort of saved everything as questions, and then my comments are that I would like us to consider the, you know, if in the future, if bookings allow, that the ball diamond that's at the northern part, it seems quite isolated. And it seems that we're trying to cram in courts and a summer play area and a public works area. And I wonder if that sport is steady and can be accommodated with the future of the Hendrickson Field expansion, that we might actually create just more space in that area for the picnic area or additional courts or something of that matter. But it just seems to be sitting in the middle of an area that could be more programmable in terms of public space and free space, that people aren't having to pay for all the sports that they're participating in. So that's something that I wanted to put out there. And also, I think the washroom should be closer to the active transportation trail that's proposed through the area that runs east-west. Right now, the washroom is down towards the Logger Sports Ground behind BMX. I wonder if it shouldn't be moved closer to that intersection with the fenced dog park and the trail. And maybe it's there to support the event. I'm not sure, but it's just something that I think we should consider. So those are some of my other comments related to this.
Councilor Pettingill.
Yeah, I had a couple comments to add. I think from my perspective on the campground, it is important to maintain some low-cost camping options, and quite rustic is fine within the district. I don't necessarily think it needs to be managed or owned by us. I don't think it necessarily needs to be at this site, but I think it needs to be somewhere. And so if we're going to not provide that option here, I think we need to be personally prepared to zone elsewhere for that. And so understanding how we might do that would be important. And I think in that, proximity to services, transit and bathrooms and so on, I think is important too. So it's not just we can put this off in a corner far away from everything necessarily. And so that's the one piece. I was thinking a lot about the private aspect of it. And in terms of inclusiveness and so on, I think it's really important that there aren't barriers to accessing. So if it is a field or whatever it is, I think avoiding any sort of user fees or is something we have to think very carefully about. So if there's an opportunity for food retail to be the profit center, that would be fine. But the core activity, I think the core activities at Brennan Park should be as accessible as possible. And so I'm not sure some of the language for me goes far enough in terms of a social benefit if we allow a private operation there. I think the nature of that benefit and making sure that anyone can participate in these activities, and that's thinking about, hey, do you need a really expensive bike to use this facility, and so how do you get that? And so that piece is important. The other thing, and it was mentioned a couple times in the presentation or in the discussion, I do think it's important for us to have a better understanding of the year-round use of the Logger Sports site and what exactly is possible there, because I don't have a good understanding of that. Thank you.
Mayor Elliott?
Sorry, I forgot two little things. One, I think one of the playgrounds should be accelerated into the short-term goals and not left for medium term. And secondly, the skate park needs to be improved and expanded, and it's not really not designated on here. But the only one currently is downtown, and so for youth that want something more in the central area, and we've had a letter from a youth that is looking for the skate park to be expanded in this area. So I think that's one thing that sort of escaped my attention the first time I looked at this.
Councillor Anderson?
I am happy with this report and his recommendations as is. I feel the principles and the goals as articulated are high enough a level that there's good flexibility, but also that they reflect the stakeholder engagement and the research and process that's been undertaken by staff. A few brief comments regarding the report. Following Councillor Pettingill, I agree that the arts, cultural, and heritage strategy should not be lost sight of. And one thing we can do is to be mindful to include it in the list of policies implications in the staff report. It isn't listed there. It's a new document, relatively new, and it hasn't really come into focus for us yet, the council or district, but it should be included there because it certainly is touched upon. And I will highlight tactics 6.3 and 6.4 and the roles for the district outlined in those tactics in that report. I think they are relevant. Secondly, the theme of volunteers and the fact that we have a growing population here in the district of Squamish, but our volunteer base is aging, declining, or at least not improving. And Mr. Hoskin's department, culture, recreation, the whole spectrum there of community life that the department handles confronts this issue, I am sure. And so maybe it's time, I'm making a general comment here, that we in council, maybe next budget, maybe apply ourselves to what role we can play to address this issue of volunteers and how to support them. Thirdly, I'm happy to see that there is opportunity and a pathway within the framework of the report and its recommendations for the Logger Sports Association to submit a proposal and rationale, and indeed for other groups as well. The Logger Sports is a world famous show, and it's world famous because of the quality of the logistics behind them. And so we'll need to bring that into focus, and other aspects of the kind of perspectives on the use of that arena will come forward in future, and there's opportunity that in this framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Through the chair, I don't think I'll be supporting this motion. I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and I think it's going in the right direction, but I've heard in today's meeting, I think too many items being brought up for further consideration to actually provide endorsement of the plan at this point. And to me, some of those critical components are the consideration of the outdoor childcare space as we think about incorporating childcare into Brennan Park. I still have questions around the potential implications of removing the camping and the impact that might have in terms of camping availability. I agree with my colleague, Councillor Pettingill, that I'm not necessarily wedded to low-cost camping being on this site per se, but I'm not sure where else we put it. And we've been advocating to the province for multiple years now for a low-cost camping facility in and around the district, and we haven't gotten very far on that. So I'm afraid that if we lose that here, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, knowing how much of a sensitive subject that is in our community right now, and how much our tourism economy relies on camping access. So there's a piece of missing information there for me in terms of what the impact would be in terms of losing those campsites relative to what else is available in the district. I'm also supportive of Mayor Elliott's suggestion of moving the change room and washroom facilities and further consideration to improving the skate park, which hasn't been articulated here. So to me, those are elements that I think really do need to be addressed before I'd be willing to endorse the plan. Thank you.
We don't actually have a motion on the floor at this point. So, Councillor Rice?
Well, thank you. Initially, when this discussion started, I thought that I'd be supportive of endorsing this I am hung up in this thought of possibly getting our land mortgaged by a private operator. And I won't go into the details of that, but to me, I can see a lot of nightmare scenarios coming out of that. The way the mortgage and seizing mortgages and reselling mortgages and stuff that banks go through with defaulting creditors. So I think that's a philosophical leap for council, and I think it needs a fuller discussion and understanding around it. But I wasn't going to not endorse the plan just because of that. My suggestion with that is to, before one gets close to coming to us, to have a discussion with council on the pros and cons of it, so we don't send staff off on a road that we actually, at the end of the day, won't support. But now, having listened to all of these other points, and I think that, there's a lot of good points have come up that I hadn't thought about, and moving that baseball field is one of them, because it's going to get quite congested around Brennan Park. The outline of Brennan Park, I think, is what is proposed with the addition of all those buildings and extra pool space and so forth. And to some extent, some of the things that have been mentioned, I think, will be inside some of the buildings. Like we've talked to the Arts Society before and the arts community about having space inside one of the multi-use buildings. And so that, and they are in favor of that. And that takes up some of the concerns that all these things don't necessarily have to be outside. But when you look at the baseball field and then you look at where the equestrian center is going, and then the long-term plan, it's a new multi-use sports field and lights. Maybe that's another place for another baseball diamond. And we can make better use of the space around Brennan Park for something else. And so I think there's a little bit of that, and there's several different comments on different points that have come up. And so for me, I'm close to being there. I think this is a really good start at it and covers most of it, but I think there's some details that I'd prefer to see nailed down before we get to the point where we have endorsed it. So there is no motion on the floor now, but I will make a motion that this be referred back to staff with comments noted.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Mayor Elliott. Council, discussion on the motion? Mayor Elliott?
Thank you. I think this plan is a really solid plan, but I'm a little bit nervous because it sort of disappeared from the public consciousness for quite a while. And the engagement was deep with all the user groups, but the public hasn't really had a chance to really absorb it. It'll come into the news cycle now because we've talked about it today. And I think giving it time to percolate in the community is not a bad thing at this point. Um, and I think the comments that I heard from my colleagues were thoughtful and should be considered in the context of this whole plan. So I think it's very close, but I'd like to see it come back to committee of the whole one more time in the not too distant future, just to wrap up some of those loose ends and maybe address some of the comments that Councillor Race had about sort of the principles of leasing, and just give the community a chance to reabsorb this. There are folks living here now that didn't live here when we did the very big engagement in 2018, and we didn't really talk about it during 2020. So well, I think we should just give it a chance to be out in the public again, and keep the public informed of how they can go and find these documents and these maps, and consider it a little bit more.
Council, any other comments? Councillor Stoner?
On that note, I would also recommend to staff and to take this away and just consider it whether we reopen the survey as part of that kind of reintroduction of the vision and the plan. After this hits the news cycle after today's meeting, it might be an opportunity to get some more formal feedback, given the low percentage rate that we had in our efforts to try and get that survey response in November. So consideration of that might be helpful.
Councillor Herford?
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. Overall, I think the principles involved and the majority of the framework of this plan is there. I think some of the questions from I'd like to think myself and fellow councillors are getting a little bit more granular, but that's where we should be at with this at this point. So I look forward to seeing it come back and hopefully accompanied with some more recent public engagement and feedback on these concepts.
Councillor Pennington?
Yeah, thanks. I'll also be supporting the motion. I do want to acknowledge I was quite impressed by the amount of consensus and the work that was done by staff and the community to achieve that consensus. I do think it is worthwhile to bring this out to the broader community, and want to also thank the mayor for pointing out the skate park piece. It's something I've had conversations and some correspondence with people about. And the other element, it's not just the location. The downtown park is a fair bit more advanced, and I see a lot of younger kids on scooters and skateboards using the Brennan Park one. And so I think it serves a different audience and is quite valuable to not lose sight of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And if there are no other comments, I'll put myself on the list. I support this direction as well. And in doing so, echo the thoughts of some of my colleagues in pointing out that excellent work has been done on this project. And what we've seen has caused us to have some great discussions, some thoughtful conversation on it today. And I think that by making this move, it'll come back to us stronger and better than before. So with that, council, I'll call the question. Are there any opposed? Motion carries, unanimous. Thank you. And at this point in our agenda, we have a recess. So I'd like for us to come back in 10 minutes at 3:35. Good afternoon and welcome back to our committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, May 25th. Council, we are now at number 3 under staff reports. And we're joined by Cal Bragg, Director of Facilities and Planning and Construction, to talk to us about Tantalus Fire Hall number 2. Mr. Bragg, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. This one's a relatively short presentation. I'm hoping there's a relatively short decision at the end of this one. I'll share my screen if that's okay.
Yes, please. That's great. We are seeing the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time this afternoon. This report to Council is regarding the Tantalus Fire Hall, the land and airspace improvement costs. The objective is to obtain Council endorsement to capitalise on the available land and airspace on the proposed new Tantalus Fire Hall site. Just a little bit of background from where we're sitting. On March 2 this year, Council endorsed replacing the Tantalus Fire Hall at its current location. Council also endorsed staff to explore the potential to design the building to allow for additional uses at this location, and a decision now is required to advance the design. Diving a little bit further, the Tantalus Fire Hall is slated to start construction next year in 2022. We're looking at about a 7,000 to 8,000 square foot premises, and that's in line with the Real Estate Facilities Master Plan. It's also in line with site prep and site numbers that we've been doing with the fire department. Right now we're in RFP for the design and construction team. And there is an opportunity to utilise airspace as noted and extra land on this particular site. And what staff has slated was there is opportunity to look at 2 to 4 stories of units, which is market or affordable. And also there may be a commercial element such as a daycare, which I'll dive into a little bit further here. The cost to do this, to release or realise this opportunity, we need to bulk the ground level, and there's a cost to do that to allow for the additional weight for the extra building above the ground floor, and that cost is estimated at $939,000. I must note it's very early in the process here. As noted, we're at RFPs to start the design team and get the actual construction proponents on site. So this cost is an order of magnitude. We've used a quantity surveyor, builders and architects, and also added a contingency in there. So we're quite comfortable on this number. There's some design considerations here. At the end of the day, this is the primary use site is emergency services. It's important that it's kept that and everything is designed around that. You know, the site layout focuses on every minute counts. Emergency response times are critical. So when we introduce other functions to the site, we need to be wary. Initial massing does, however, show that a split is possible to have 2 functions on the site. The way that we can do that is by having separate entrances. That eliminates crossover between staff arriving for emergency response and then also residential living. So we literally have separate areas here. That includes parking and separate function areas. And this site does allow that via design. The daycare, which was previously discussed, is not recommended. There is space for a daycare. It's not recommended due to site function. When we dived in on the design and massing side, working together on the same property, in particular when a child drop off or pick up times occur, and then also emergency response times coincide, it's not optimal and not recommended by any means. When they cross over there, it's a safety issue as well. Outdoor areas required for a daycare limit the design. We're primarily focused on, and the shape of the site is primarily focused on having very efficient ground floor design. By adding in the outdoor area for daycare, which is required at about 6 square meters per child, it moves things around, particularly at the back of the lot there. If we did fit a daycare in with outdoor area on the back, then we're close to the hydro lines as well, which causes its own issues as well. From an environmental standpoint, sustainability, with the Real Estate Facilities Master Plan, one of our primary concerns is when we build any buildings is to make sure we do it in the reduced carbon way and energy efficient way possible. When we do add on additional floors above the ground floor, ideally and typically in a standard construction is to change it over to concrete to allow for the additional weight. Particularly in Squamish, this is an issue because of liquefaction, and we've got some geotech hurdles on the site as well. Cost does come into play as well, particularly the way the lumber prices are going at the moment. But when we're looking at this, it's not a standard building. This is actually a post-disaster building, being emergency services. So without even the concrete or without even the bulking, we need to have a stronger structure to allow for the post-disaster building, which is another level of engineering required. When we switch over to concrete, we change the carbon capture. Wood is our, when using the structural elements in the building as wood, we save on the carbon side, which is really what we focus on in all real estate, on all the RCMP buildings here. Adding additional floors above also increase the design complexity. And there's a little bit of design time and construction times added. It's about 3 months, give or take. Complexity is there's unknown unknowns. For example, there's a transformer on site, which we just saw the other day. And what that does is then changes the shape of the building and how we go up, because we need to move around it, or we need to remove it altogether. And it's just an example of complexity that happens when we do end up going up a little bit higher from the ground floors. However, there is significant opportunity when moving forward and bulking the ground level. One of them is to create developable space at a lower price than the existing current land cost. So if we were to buy land and put the same amount of affordable housing, for example, on there, it'll be much cheaper to do it this way. It's a much more straightforward process. We also get to lock it in at today's rate. So if you pay the cost now, we mitigate the construction cost and the escalation that has happened. And historically, looking at the real estate facilities master plan, the prices that we estimated in there from 2017, the escalation is larger than we initially anticipated. And I think moving forward, it's going to continue to escalate. And that's partially from COVID, partially from supply and demand from lumber. We're seeing steel prices significantly increase and windows as well, glazing as well. And the other side is to mitigate the developable land cost increases as well. The other opportunities here is it puts the district in a future flexibility arena where we can utilise this space for, it's not just affordable housing, it literally is for anything that we can work within a highest and best use on that particular site, which is market residential and other district uses as well. So I'm recommending that the district, or staff recommends that the district of Squamish adds bulking cost of approximately $939,000 to the ground floor of construction to allow for future airspace expansion of the Tantalus fire hall.
Thank you, Mr. Bragg. And you're prepared to take questions? Yes?
Yes.
Council, are there any questions? Councillor Anderson, followed by Mayor Elliott.
Thank you. At this stage, and we do have some time constraints, as I gather from your presentation, Mr. Bragg, are there opportunities to consider other options for the use of the upper space as in alternative to housing? For example, and I can kind of anticipate the answer to this because we really haven't done enough work on it, but we have a long-standing need for various types of cultural spaces or for use by cultural groups. In the real estate and facilities master plan, these are not really broken out in a nuanced format, and the Arts, Cultural and Heritage Society is kind of a to-do list to get started on this. But for example, the theater company here has been a challenge for the last 55 years in its space needs, and currently they're using a hotel for rehearsal. And I don't know about the dance community as regards their needs and visions for their future. So my general question is, at this point in our planning, are we kind of committed as regards your pathway to consider really only housing? Is there opportunity to consider alternative uses that might be a cost saving, because housing in itself does have some cost issues for us. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Through the chair, Councillor Anderson, the answer is yes, in short. Once it's bulked, we can put on a single level, we can go up to 2 to 4 levels. We're in a position to basically put anything that we deem as highest and best use for the site. And one of the other discussion points here is, as Squamish grows, we anticipate it's going to keep growing north there. And at some point in the future, we're going to need another fire hall to service the northern area. And bear in mind, the current fire halls are volunteer fire halls, so staff come and drive in. So much like Valley Cliff at some point where it gets switched over to, we may need accommodation at some point for the fire department. And this also gives us an opportunity to add additional buildings on top, and then we can work the other fire halls in the future. So what it does is it puts us in a position of flexibility. Is probably the best answer there.
Thank you. That does address my question. I have a follow-up, if you like, Chair. And that is, there is a reference in your report to a suspended concrete floor. Now, that might be a reference to, or the context of that may be to illustrate the difference in terms of carbon emissions between timber or timber hybrid and concrete. But my question is this not a typical podium construction design? And so why would we need a suspended concrete floor up above? Would it not be a timber floor or a hybrid timber floor?
Through the chair, good question, Councillor Anderson. The reason we've said suspended is normally the bulking would include, and it depends on the design and the engineer at the time, the bulking can include using the suspended slab as part of the structure. The other item here is that if we have a fire hall below and then we have residential above, we're mixing the two together. So we do need to have an element of fire separation there as well. So to answer your question, we don't know just yet until we dive in from the engineer's side. I mean, our mandate obviously is to stick as much structural lumber in as we feasibly can, where we can, and we're dictated by the engineers, which are about to dive into this process in the next few months here.
Thank you, Chair.
Mayor Elliott?
Mr. Bragg, if we wanted to build housing as the fire hall goes up, when would we have to have it ready to go?
Through the chair, now. We need that decision. If we wanted to spend it, it's now. That does open up the other item of funding. And we have touched base with BC Housing there, and the feedback wasn't fast, and the question of having mixed use and not having a sole affordable housing site hasn't been resolved yet. It was raised by BC Housing. So.
Sorry, they didn't want to share uses.
I think sorry, through the chair. I think their focus would be if there is a clean site that is pure affordable housing, it's much easier to create their product than it is to have a fire hall beneath and try and work something as mixed use.
Right. Yes, they want to build modular cookie cutter housing, I think. So then my second question is, if we do the bulking and then you put, usually all the HVAC system is on top for the building, then what happens when we go to expand in the future? All that has to come out and...
Through the chair, we need to design around that. There's a lot of hurdles on this one from the design point. The massing works. The architects have signed off on the initial massing. We're looking at just bulking the spine side and not so much the apparatus bay as well. At this stage, we could change that up at a later point. But the sizing that we've got here and the way that it's shaped leads to just bulking the spine side and not so much the apparatus bay side. So we'll end up moving some things around that way. But it's still pretty early days in the whole process here. I'm not 100% certain where things are going to be located.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. I think the mayor's questions kind of got at what I was going to ask, but just for clarification, and I'm asking this both from an engineering perspective, but also a legal perspective, how easy is it to put something on top later? Engineering wise, it sounds like BC Housing isn't so keen sort of legally process wise, but you know, if we were to imagine, hey, we want to sell the airspace to a private entity to do something, you know, is this sort of like easy to do, or like we're going to spend $1 million on getting the base prepared and then we have massive hurdles after the fact still?
Through the chair, it's cheaper still to do it this way than it is to buy land. But going back to your original question there, Councillor Pettingill, we can design around it. Once the design team knows that that's coming, we can design around that. It's much easier to do it now whilst construction is happening than it is to do it at a later date.
Okay, and if I might, do we know in terms of, you know, the legal options to us to sell it to a private operator to do housing above or something like that? Or are we really sort of, it has to be us or someone like BC Housing convincing them to do something above?
Through the chair, I can have a guess at that question and say we're okay, but I need to dive in to confirm that from the legal side. You know, putting a developer hat on, there shouldn't be any reason legally from it, from my background, but we need to dive in to confirm that one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pettingill. Council, any other questions? Councillor Herford?
Thank you. I understand being prepared for eventual keeping sort of our options open, but having something, I think we can all agree, having something all queued up and ready to go is ideal. So with the BC Housing conversation, it sounds like it's ongoing. Is there, just wondering if it's worth a pause to pursue that more directly, or if that is what comes after we've approved this bulking this step. I'm just trying to understand how the cart and horse might come aligned in this process. I see Mr. Buxton popping up.
Thank you, Cal. I can probably take this one through the chair. With respect to BC Housing, it's really a matter of us having something tangible to put in front of them. They're not that interested in hypothetical conversations or around helping with designs. It's kind of like, what have you got, and are we likely to fund it? They tend to prefer projects that are purely residential, so they don't have to say, well, which part of the structures are we funding, which part do we not fund? That's with the similar in the youth hub in the Buckley project. That's had to be completely separated from BC Housing in the way they fund that project. So it's not impossible, but we literally we have to put something in front of them under one of their funding programs to see where we might end up with that. It can be a concept. It doesn't have to be a finished building permit design, but we're going to have to put something in front of them relatively quickly if we want to build the housing at the same time as this fire hall.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Councillor Herford, anything further?
Well, I'm just going to assume that this is staff's preferred order of operation, given that this is on our agenda for today. So, and go with that. Is that correct?
The chair, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Just wondering if staff can speak to the financial implications of this for our 5-year financial planning process and the real estate and facilities master plan more broadly. If we put $1 million here, it means $1 million can't be allocated somewhere else. And so do we understand what that trade-off is at this point?
Through the chair, we do. And is Roland on at the moment?
Yes, he is. And so
Roland, may I refer?
Through the chair, I'd be happy to answer that question on behalf of the finance department. We've been working with Cal and Neil around the idea and the concept of the long-range plan and the 5-year financial plan, more specifically. And we are planning on coming back to council in June with a more definitive picture of how these various pieces fit together. With respect to this specific project, what I would add is timing-wise, we weren't able to incorporate a refinancing of this within the budget amendment that was proposed. It was really just a timing issue. We needed to move forward with the budget amendment, and there were still some unanswered questions with respect to Mr. Bragg's report. At this point in time, We have contemplated how to finance the additional funds if that is approved by council, and that will be reflected in our 22 through 26 financial plan. And with the approval of, with the decision today, we would then also incorporate that into capital planning analysis that we're going to be bringing back to council in June. I hope that answers your question, and if not, I'd be happy to add more.
Councillor Stoner?
That is helpful. I guess just for clarification, like, does it mean, do we get a sense right now, does it mean that we're taking something else off the table, or do we think we can incorporate it as to the other things that were on the plan?
At this point in time, I believe that the answer to that would be we could incorporate the additional cost of the massing of this project. We anticipate that we would refinance or reorganize the financing of Fire Hall 2. And it would change from the current financing, which is heavily weighted towards the land reserve. We would also have to investigate whether or not we would be able to use funds from the Affordable Housing Reserve to assist with financing of this project. And obviously, until council makes a decision one way or the other on whether they want us to move forward, we can't answer that question. So there are some moving pieces that we haven't exactly nailed down, but we're pretty close. We think that that would require additional debt against Fire Hall 2, but we clearly believe that it is feasible and possible to do. Thank you. Through the chair.
Gil, I saw your hand. I just want to check in with other councillors to see if there's anybody else who hasn't asked a question yet. Not seeing any hands. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. So just with the resolution that's before us, endorsing the advancement of the design, does that still give us room when we hear more detail about the finances in June and maybe hear back on how easy it is to sell the airspace above to a private entity to change direction, and this just gives us something to talk to BC Housing about, or if we endorse this, we're kind of locked and loaded on this approach?
Through the chair, Councillor Pettingill, we're pretty much locked and loaded because it puts us in a position to put this in as a scope of works for the design team early. Having said that, if we say no to it now, then we're kind of painting ourselves into a corner of using this opportunity. So I understand it's not an easy decision to be made. It's not a small amount of money. But if you're looking at it from a future looking back, had we not do this, and we decide in the future to unlock the airspace here, the additional cost after construction is done is probably cost prohibitive, because you'll end up having to do like an exoskeleton or an outside frame, or putting frames through the building to actually support the additional weight above there. So there's a bit of a one-time opening here that we can get in at the cheapest rate possible to do this, to unlock that opportunity.
Yes, Councillor Pettingill.
And sorry, just not to belabor this, but what is preventing us from in 2 weeks, presumably when we get this report around the financing and so on, about making the decision then? Is there really a 2-week window where it has to be before, like now, and we can't wait 2 weeks? Or
through the chair, we can wait 2 weeks. Yeah, absolutely. We can wait probably, I think the window here would probably be a month. Maybe we can stretch it out to a month and a half with the participants coming on board.
Okay, thank you. Council, any further questions? Mr. Russell.
If I may, through the chair, if I may add simply the comment, what we were hoping to get Councillor Pettingill to address your question is, we would like to be able to incorporate a change in financing for the Fire Hall 2, if that is required. And we would like to be able to incorporate that in the plan that we're planning on bringing forward in June, So an indication as to whether or not there's a desire to spend this additional $1 million will be helpful to allow us to do that. And you know, that's basically, since this is coming forward at this point, we're hoping that you provide an indication one way or the other as to whether council, you know, is in favor of this idea. And then we would then incorporate that within the proposal that we're bringing forward in June. So just to add that piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Mayor Elliott, go ahead.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
For a seconder, that's seconded by Councillor Grace. Council discussion. I'll start with Mayor Elliott, followed by Councillor Grace, then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. To me, this makes a lot of sense, and I know we have a lot of priorities in the real estate and facilities master plan, but housing is a critical one, and the land isn't getting any cheaper around here. And so I think that we have to always be planning for the future, and there's conversations we can be having in the background with whether it's BC Housing or through the Housing Hub or not-for-profits that are here locally about how this might work. So I think it future-proofs our options and is being done at a time when in advance of when we were going to map out the whole real estate and facilities master plan funding arrangement anyway. So I think this gets incorporated into that, and we figure out the way forward. We knew this was going to be a hard piece of work to get all this funded, but I would just kick myself if we didn't take this opportunity to use our airspace for the highest and best use possible.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. And I think this makes eminent good sense at this point, notwithstanding the extra cost. I mean, when we think of our recent deals with BC Housing, basically we've provided the land and they've funded the building. I don't expect the district would ever be funding the housing. It possibly could come from private sources, or it could come from BC Housing once they see what's in front of them. But land is very dear, and this is just in effect creating land. I have some faith in the design process. I have to tell you, many years ago when I was going through Europe on a shoestring budget, I stayed in a cheap hotel one night, which was in Italy, which was built above a fire hall. And there was a fire that night, not in the building, but the fire department, of course, exited the building in the middle of the night and left me with an indelible impression that residential and fire halls should not mix together. But I have faith that technology and design and soundproofing and so forth has advanced now to allow this to happen. But the other, to me, it opens up a whole bunch of possibilities. I mean, for example, we could think that maybe the best use is to have a floor of office space for district purposes, and then maybe just 2 floors of residential above. There's just any number of possible considerations. So I think, but having to do it now is essential. We can't come and retrofit. That's very expensive. So I think this makes great sense to go ahead with this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Anderson, followed by Councillor Grifford.
Thank you. I have 3 comments. First of all, Mr. Bragg's report uses the term lumber. And for example, to quote, switch from lumber to concrete. I might suggest that this is, we might distinguish between light wood frame construction and mass timber construction. And that lumber is not a term we typically apply to mass timber. And this is important because mass timber is topical, not least for the province these days, and we are following this. Mass timber is part of our economic development sector strategy. And we have a very large mass timber development proposed. One of the largest in the country is at Oceanfront. And so this will become part of our dialogue as we go forward. But that term lumber, it struck me as being a little bit kind of on the fence there. Secondly, Mr. Bragg's report has emphasized the extra design complexity and cost. And there are 2 sources of subsidized funding for technical design. One is the Mass Timber Development Program, and we haven't assumed that this is where we're going in terms of materials for this building, but they are funding a fire hall design in Saanich at this time. Our timing doesn't line up. Even if there was a second round coming for that type of funding, maybe we'll miss it. But the other source of funding is the Canadian Wood Council Woodworks BC program, which has ongoing free technical advice. And I'll just trust that that may be explored or has been considered by staff. And some of the questions are interesting and topical design challenges, and they will definitely be interested in a conversation. They're in North Vancouver, not so far away. Finally, the report is focused on best practice policies for embodied carbon in buildings. And that's just kudos to staff on this. We have no policy really, including in our community climate action plan on this topic because it's a fairly new one. We do not have requirements or incentives regarding embodied carbon in buildings. All of our conversation is around operational energy. So good on staff. We're taking our cues that we are interested in this, but there's some things that we need to look forward to, and this would include our sustainability coordinator and sort of across departments is what references are we making? Mr. Bragg's report refers to a 2014 report, but a lot has happened in the last 7 years on this topic, nearby in the city of Vancouver. Finally, we can encourage developers to do the same thing. As a formality, tell us what they're doing. Tell us what they'd like to do. This is a cost-effective way to influence behavior, and we don't need to yet go to regulations and requirements. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Pettingill. Councillor Stoner, did I see your hand? Or okay, Councillor Pettingill, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I will support this. I'd also like to test an amendment. So I'd like to move that support the motion, but that council staff before proceeding bring back a cost to reinforce the bay as well.
Council, is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Pettingill, I do not see a seconder for here.
Okay, so I will speak to why I am supporting this. I think the arguments about needing the price of land and needing the space regardless is compelling, and that's why I tested the motion about the bay, given the importance of taking what available land we have. I thought that made sense to look at the whole picture, but I do have some hesitation knowing that we have debt limits and a lot of pressures. And so I think there is going to be some discussion in terms of our broader real estate facilities master plan, and some things may need to come off the list. And so I think we also have to be careful that we're not sort of creating land here, but then losing land elsewhere because we can't dispose of something, or we have to dispose of something really valuable to make all the debt work. And so, you know, have a bit of concern about that piece, but that'll be, I guess, for a near future discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill, and I'll put myself on the list. Okay, Councillor Herford, I saw your hand there. I definitely feel that this is a smart investment in our community's future. I support the motion. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. I do think that with the land costs and with the needs of the community as far as from a housing standpoint, I think this is a responsible thing to do to make sure that we keep our options open. My preference, as I'm sure all of ours is that everything, all the stars align and everything happens at once. But this is a first step, and without doing this, then you know, we would be committed, and we would lose the potential. So I'm happy to support this. I look forward to seeing all the rest of the stars align that will make this happen.
Thank you. Council, any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Bragg. Mayor Elliott?
Did Mr. Bragg answer Councillor Pettengill's question in terms of what it would cost to look at bulking up the bays?
Through the chair, no. I can give you a massing rough number here, which is based on square foot, which is around $750,000, give or take.
And I thought I heard in your answer the reason we weren't bulking up the bays was so that we could situate some of the infrastructure on the bays so that it wouldn't have to be moved later.
Through the chair, correct. This is so early in the whole process here. It's very difficult to give accurate numbers based on that, particularly for the apparatus bay. So whilst I've just given you a number there, that's just a very rough estimate based on what the consultants have said. So diving in over the next month, literally with the consultants, we can get a better, more accurate design, closer massing, and then can really work out the details on that side.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Mr. Bragg. Okay, council, next is motion to close the staff recommendation that the meeting be closed to public in consideration pursuant to section 90 of the community charter, subsection 1E and 2B. Did I see your hand there, Councillor Hertford? It's moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Are there any opposed? Motion carries. So council will revert over to the in-camera link and 5 minutes.